The fortress had no name anymore. Once, perhaps, it had been called something grand, something that spoke of kings and conquests, of banners snapping in the wind and horns echoing through mountain passes. But centuries had a way of erasing such things. Now it was simply hers, a sprawling monument of blackened stone and iron, perched on the edge of a cliff where the world seemed to end. Below, the mist churned like a living thing, swallowing valleys and forests whole. Above, the sky was perpetually bruised, caught in that strange twilight that never quite became night and never fully remembered day. Inside, the halls were silent save for the occasional drip of water from ancient ceilings, the distant scrape of clawed feet on stone, or the whisper of wind through arrow slits that had not seen arrows in generations. Torches burned in iron sconces, their flames a dull crimson that cast more shadow than light. The air smelled of old metal, older stone, and something faintly sweet and coppery that clung to the back of the throat. In a chamber deep within the fortress, neither dungeon nor throne room, but something in between, a man knelt before a queen. His name was Matthias, though he suspected she had forgotten it. Or perhaps she simply chose not to use it. She called him Smith or human or sometimes nothing at all, only fixing him with those eyes that burned like coals dipped in blood. He was mortal, she was not. He was temporary, she was eternal. The distance between them was not merely one of station or power, but of fundamental existence. And yet, here he was, close enough to feel the cold radiating from her skin, close enough to see the faint tracery of veins beneath her pale throat, close enough to hear the absence of breath in her lungs. She stood before him, taller than any woman he had ever known, her presence filling the chamber like a physical force. Her armor was a masterwork, black steel chased with silver, crimson enamel inlaid in patterns that seemed to shift in the torchlight, forming shapes that were almost words, almost sigils, almost memories. The chest plate was the crown jewel of the ensemble, a piece of artistry that had taken some long-dead craftsman years to forge. It curved elegantly, designed not merely for protection but for majesty, each rivet and seam placed with the precision of a jeweler setting diamonds. But even the finest armor could be damaged. Even eternal queens could bleed if only a little. Matthias had been summoned 3 days ago. A servant, if one could call the pale, hollow-eyed things that drifted through the fortress servants, had appeared in the workshop where he was kept, gesturing silently for him to follow. He had learned not to ask questions. Questions in this place were dangerous. Questions suggested curiosity, and curiosity suggested will, and will was something best kept hidden. He had been brought to this chamber, shown the damage, and given his tools. The chest plate had been struck. By what, he did not know and would not ask. The blow had bent one of the inner clasps, cracked the enamel along the lower edge, and dislodged several rivets. It was delicate work, requiring patience and a steady hand. It also required proximity. Matthias had done his best to work quickly, to keep his eyes on the metal and his thoughts on the task. But it was impossible not to be aware of her. She stood utterly still, a statue carved from alabaster and shadow, her hands resting lightly at her sides. Her wings, vast, membranous things that seemed woven from darkness itself, were folded against her back, their edges brushing the floor. Occasionally they would twitch, a faint rustle of leathery membrane, and he would freeze, wondering if he had caused her discomfort. She never said anything. Not at first. The silence stretched, broken only by the soft clink of his tools against metal. He worked carefully, aware that every movement brought his hands closer to her, to the cold curve of her collarbone, the hollow at the base of her throat, the edge of the black fabric that lay beneath the armor. His fingers were calloused, stained with soot and oil, rough and mortal. Hers, when he caught glimpses of them, were slender and pale, tipped with nails that could have been carved from obsidian. He was adjusting the clasp, pressing it gently back into place, feeling for the give of the metal, when she moved. It was so slight he almost missed it. A shift of weight, a subtle lean forward, a faint intake of air that she did not need to take. And then her voice, low and smooth as silk drawn over a blade. Careful. He froze, his hands suspended in midair, the tool still pressed against the edge of the plate. That part's sensitive. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. He did not dare look up. Did not dare meet her eyes. His heart, which had been beating steadily, if a little quickly, now hammered against his ribs like a prisoner demanding release. I apologize, Your Majesty, he managed, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't mean to cause discomfort. Discomfort. She repeated the word as if tasting it, as if it were a flavor she had not encountered in a very long time. Is that what you think you're causing? He did not know how to answer that. Did not know if he should answer. The silence returned, thicker now, charged with something he could not name. He forced himself to breathe, to focus, to continue the work. His hands moved again, slower this time, more deliberate. The clasp was nearly back in place. Just a little more pressure, a slight adjustment of the angle. Do you fear me, Smith? The question came without warning, slicing through the quiet like a blade. Matthias swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. Yes, he said, because lying to her seemed even more dangerous than the truth. Good. There was something almost like satisfaction in her tone. Fear is honest. Fear keeps you sharp. I have no use for those who forget what they stand before. He nodded, though he was not sure she could see it. His eyes were still fixed on the armor, on the small section of damaged metal that had become the entire world. And yet, she continued, her voice dropping to something softer, something that might have been amusement or might have been something far more perilous, you continue to work. Your hands do not shake, much. You do not flee. Curious. You summon me, he said quietly. It is my duty. Duty. Another word tasted and set aside. Such a mortal concern. Tell me, Smith, if I released you from duty, would you run? If I told you to leave this chamber and never return, would you take that chance? Matthias considered the question. Considered the workshop where he slept on a cot beside the forge. Considered the high walls and the mist-choked valleys and the things that moved in the darkness beyond the torchlight. Considered, too, the villages he had left behind, or that had been taken from him. The line between the two had blurred over the years. I don't know where I would go, he admitted. Honest again. She sounded pleased. You have been here, how long? 7 years, Majesty. Perhaps 8. Time moves strangely in this place. It does. Pause. Do you regret it? Being here? He hesitated. This was dangerous ground. But she had asked, and he sensed that she would know if he lied. Sometimes, he said carefully. But there are worse fates. Are there? Her voice was very close now. He realized with a start that she had leaned down, her face level with his own, though he still did not look up. What do you imagine those fates might be? Being forgotten, he said. Being nothing. Dying unmade. The silence that followed was different. It was not heavy or charged but thoughtful. He felt her gaze on him, weighing him, measuring something he could not see. You are unexpected, she said at last. Most mortals beg for mercy or scream defiance. You do neither. I am a smith, he replied. I make things. I fix things. It's what I know. And if what you are fixing is me? He finally looked up, unable to stop himself. Her face was inches from his own, so close he could see the faint luminescence in her eyes, the way the torchlight slid across her skin like oil on water. Her lips were parted slightly, her expression unreadable, neither cruel nor kind, neither mocking nor sincere. She was beautiful in the way a storm was beautiful, in the way a drawn blade was beautiful. Something to be admired from a distance or not at all. Then I will do my best, he said, to leave no mark. Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise perhaps. Or recognition. Too late for that, she murmured. Before he could ask what she meant, she straightened, stepping back and giving him space once more. The moment, whatever it had been, passed like a shadow fleeing the dawn. Finish your work, Smith, she said, her voice once again the cold, imperious tone of a queen. And do not take too long. I have use for that armor tonight. Yes, Majesty. He bent back to the task, his hands steadier now, though his mind was anything but. The clasp clicked into place. The rivets were secured. The enamel, though cracked, was stable. It was not perfect, but it would hold. When he finally stepped back, the armor was whole again, or as whole as it could be. She flexed slightly, testing the fit, and nodded in approval. Adequate. Thank you, Majesty. She turned to leave, her wings unfurling slightly as she moved, casting long shadows across the chamber. But at the threshold she paused. Matthias. He started. She had not used his name in years. Perhaps ever. Your Majesty? Tomorrow night. The chest plate's left pauldron will need reinforcement. You will return. It was not a question. Yes, Majesty. She glanced back over her shoulder, and for just a moment, he saw something in her expression. Something that might have been curiosity or amusement, or the faintest edge of something far more dangerous. Do not disappoint me. And then she was gone, the sound of her footsteps fading into the darkness beyond. Matthias stood alone in the chamber, his tools scattered around him, his heart still racing. He did not know what had just happened. Did not know what it meant. But he knew with a certainty that settled in his bones like cold iron, that something had changed. And he did not know if that was a blessing or a curse. The workshop was Matthias's domain, and perhaps the only place in the entire fortress where he felt something approaching peace. It was a large vaulted space carved directly into the mountain's bones, with a forge at its heart that burned day and night with flames that never seemed to need tending. The heat was oppressive, the air thick with smoke and the smell of molten metal, but it was his oppression, his smoke. Here at least he understood the rules. Iron obeyed certain laws. Heat it enough and it would bend. Cool it too quickly and it would shatter. Strike it at the wrong angle and it would split. But treat it with patience, with respect, and it would become whatever you needed it to be. There was honesty in that. A clarity that the rest of the fortress lacked. He had returned to the workshop after that first encounter with the vampire queen, his mind churning over every word, every glance, every breath she had not taken. He had worked through the night, not on any particular project, but simply to work, to hammer and shape and bend until his muscles ached and his thoughts quieted. But they did not quiet for long. The next evening, as promised, the summons came again. This time he was more prepared. He gathered his tools with care, selected the finest files and hammers, checked the quality of his rivets and clasps. If he was to return to her presence, he would do so with everything he needed. No excuses. No delays. The servant led him through different corridors this time, deeper into the fortress, past chambers he had never seen. The walls here were older, the stone worn smooth by centuries of touch or perhaps by something else entirely. Strange carvings adorned the archways, figures that were neither wholly human nor wholly beast, their forms twisted in poses of ecstasy or agony or something that blurred the line between the two. He did not look too closely. The chamber he was brought to was smaller than the first, more intimate. A sitting room, perhaps, or a place for private councils. A single window, narrow and tall, overlooked the mist-shrouded abyss beyond. Moonlight, pale and sickly, filtered through, painting everything in shades of silver and shadow. The vampire queen was already there. She stood by the window, her back to him, her wings half spread as if she were considering flight. She wore the same armor, though now it gleamed as if freshly polished, the crimson enamel catching the moonlight and throwing it back in ruby flashes. Your Majesty, Matthias said, bowing low. Smith. She did not turn. The left pauldron. There is a weakness in the joint. I can feel it when I move. He approached carefully, setting his tools down on a low table beside her. May I examine it? You may. He moved to her left side, his eyes scanning the armor. The pauldron was a complex piece, layered plates that allowed for movement while providing protection. The joint was articulated with small hinges and reinforced with leather straps beneath. He could see immediately what she meant. One of the hinges was loose, the rivet holding it worn down by use. I'll need to remove the pauldron to repair it properly, he said. Then do so. He reached up, she was tall enough that he had to stretch slightly, and began unfastening the buckles that held the pauldron in place. His fingers worked quickly, efficiently, though he was acutely aware of how close he was to her, how his knuckles brushed against the edge of her armor, how the cold emanating from her seemed to seep into his skin. The pauldron came free and he set it aside, revealing the layered padding and chainmail beneath. The armor was designed to be worn over other protective layers, and even without the pauldron she was hardly vulnerable. Still, there was something strangely intimate about seeing even this much. A glimpse of the construction beneath the majesty, the practicality beneath the symbol. You built this armor yourself? He asked, then immediately regretted it. Questions were dangerous. But she answered, no, it was made for me. Long ago. By a smith far more skilled than you. He nodded, accepting the rebuke without complaint. They did exceptional work. He did. Pause. He is dust now, of course. They all are. Matthias said nothing. There was nothing to say. He worked in silence, heating a new rivet in a small brazier he had brought, hammering it into place with careful, measured strikes. The sound rang out in the small chamber, sharp and clear. When it was done, he tested the joint, flexing it gently, ensuring the movement was smooth. It should hold now, he said. But the leather straps are beginning to wear. They'll need replacing soon. How soon? A few months, perhaps. It depends on how often you wear it. Every night, she said. I wear it every night. He glanced up at her, surprised. May I ask why? She finally turned, her glowing eyes fixing on him with an intensity that made him want to step back. But he held his ground. Because I am a queen, she said simply. And a queen is never unarmed. Never unguarded. Never without the symbols of her power. She tilted her head slightly. Do you understand? I think so. Do you? She stepped closer and he had to crane his neck to maintain eye contact. You are a smith. You make things. But do you understand what it means to be the thing you have made? To have no separation between the self and the symbol? He considered that. I suppose, when I'm at the forge, I'm not just a man. I'm the work. The heat, the metal, the hammer, they're all part of me. If I stopped, I wouldn't know what I was anymore. She studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then slowly she nodded. Yes, exactly that. Another silence, but this one felt different. Less like a void and more like a shared space. Replace the straps, she said at last. And check the other joints as well. I would know if any other weaknesses are developing. Yes, Majesty. He worked methodically, checking each hinge, each buckle, each point of articulation. It was painstaking work, and it required him to move around her, to reach across her, to stand close enough that he could feel the absence of warmth where warmth should be. She stood perfectly still throughout, her gaze distant, as if she were looking at something far beyond the walls of the chamber. At one point, as he was inspecting the back plate, his hand slipped. It was a small thing, a moment of inattention, a tool that shifted in his grip. His knuckles brushed against her side, just below the ribs, where the armor gave way to the softer padding beneath. She went rigid. He pulled his hand back as if burned, his heart leaping into his throat. I apologize, Majesty. I didn't mean. Be still. The command was absolute. He froze, his breath caught in his chest. She turned her head slowly, looking down at him over her shoulder. Her eyes were brighter now, glowing like embers fanned to life. You touched me, she said, her voice very soft. It was an accident. I swear. I know. She turned fully, facing him now, and he realized with a start that she was closer than she had been before. When had she moved? Or had he? I'm not angry, Smith. I am curious. Curious, Majesty? You are the first mortal in decades to touch me without invitation. The first who did not do so in combat or in other contexts. Her lips curved slightly, a ghost of a smile that did not reach her eyes. And you apologized. I didn't want to cause offense. Offense. She seemed to taste the word again as she had before. Do you know how long it has been since anyone worried about offending me? Since anyone saw me as something other than a force to be feared or a prize to be claimed? He did not know how to answer that. She reached out and for a moment he thought she was going to strike him. But instead, she touched his chin, tilting his head up with one cold finger, forcing him to meet her gaze. You are an unusual creature, Matthias the Smith, she said quietly. You do not cower but you do not presume. You do not beg but you do not demand. You simply are. It is almost refreshing. I'm just trying to survive, Majesty. Aren't we all? She released him, stepping back, and the moment shattered like glass. Finish your work. I have matters to attend to. He nodded, not trusting his voice, and returned to the armor. His hands were shaking now, but he forced them steady. He would not give her the satisfaction of seeing him rattled. But as he worked, he could feel her watching him. Could feel the weight of her gaze like a physical thing. And when he finally finished and gathered his tools to leave, she spoke one last time. Tomorrow, she said. Same time. There is more work to be done. Yes, Majesty. He bowed and left, his mind a whirlwind of confusion and something else, something he did not want to name. Behind him, in the chamber, the vampire queen stood alone, her fingers resting lightly on the place where his hand had brushed her side. And for the first time in a very, very long time she smiled. It became a ritual. Each evening as the sun, what little of it penetrated the perpetual gloom, bled out of the sky, the summons would come. Matthias would gather his tools, make his way through the twisting corridors, and find himself once again in the presence of the vampire queen. Sometimes it was the same chamber. Sometimes different ones. Once he was brought to the armory itself, a vast hall lined with weapons and armor from 100 different eras, each piece a relic of conquest or tribute. She had stood among them like a monument, her own armor making the rest look like crude imitations. The work was always genuine. A bent plate here, a loose rivet there, a strap that needed tightening or a hinge that needed oil. She wore her armor constantly and the wear showed. But Matthias began to suspect that the repairs were not always as urgent as she claimed. Some could have waited. Some could have been handled by a lesser craftsman. But she summoned him. And he came. The conversations began slowly, tentatively, like the first notes of a song neither of them knew how to play. At first she asked questions, about his work, his tools, his techniques. He answered as best he could, describing the properties of different metals, the temperatures needed to forge or temper, the way iron sang under a hammer if you struck it just right. She listened with an attention that was almost unnerving. Her eyes never left him when he spoke, and he had the distinct impression that she was memorizing every word, every inflection, filing them away in some vast mental archive. Then gradually she began to share as well. Small things at first. Observations about the fortress, comments on the weather beyond the walls, mentions of servants or soldiers or the strange creatures that prowled the lower levels. But as the nights wore on, the revelations grew deeper. One night, as he was adjusting a buckle on her gauntlet, she spoke of the fortress's history. How it had been built by a warlord centuries ago, a man who had thought himself invincible. How she had taken it from him in a single night, walking through his defenses as if they were cobwebs, and claimed it as her own. He begged at the end, she said, her voice distant. They always do. They build their walls and sharpen their swords and tell themselves they are ready for anything. But when death comes they beg. Did you grant him mercy? Matthias asked quietly. No, she paused. But I made it quick. That is a mercy in its way. Another night she spoke of her kind, the others like her, scattered across the world. We do not gather, she said. We are solitary by nature. To bring two of us together is to invite war. We are apex creatures, Smith. There can be no sharing of territory, no negotiation. Only dominance or destruction. That sounds lonely, he ventured. She looked at him sharply, and for a moment he thought he had overstepped. But then her expression softened just a fraction. It is the way of things. Does it have to be? Yes. The word was final, absolute. But then quieter, perhaps. I do not know any more. There were other nights too. Nights when she did not speak at all, but simply stood in silence while he worked. Nights when she seemed lost in thought, her gaze fixed on some distant point beyond the walls. He learned to read her moods, not perfectly but enough to know when to speak and when to stay silent. And there were moments, brief, fleeting moments, when the mask slipped. Like the night he cut himself. It was a stupid mistake, the kind a novice would make. He had been working on a particularly stubborn rivet, and the file had slipped, gashing his palm. Blood welled up immediately, bright and red, startlingly vivid against his soot-stained skin. He hissed in pain and pulled his hand back, cradling it against his chest. It was not a serious wound, but it bled freely, droplets spattering onto the stone floor. The vampire queen moved before he could react. One moment she was across the chamber. The next she was in front of him, her hand wrapped around his wrist, pulling his injured palm up toward her face. Her grip was iron-hard, inescapable. Her eyes had gone wide, the crimson glow intensifying until they seemed to burn. Her lips parted and he saw the tips of her fangs, sharp, white, deadly. For a heartbeat he was certain he was about to die. But she did not bite. She held his hand there, inches from her mouth, her entire body trembling with the effort of restraint. He could hear a faint sound, a low, almost subsonic growl emanating from deep in her chest. "Majesty," he said softly. "It's all right." Her gaze snapped to his, and he saw something in her eyes he had never seen before: fear. Not of him but of herself. Of what she might do. "Leave," she said, her voice strained. "Now." "But—" "Leave." He did not argue. He pulled his hand free, surprised when she let him, and gathered his tools with his uninjured hand. He moved quickly but not in panic. Panic would be an insult. At the threshold he paused and looked back. She had turned away, her wings wrapped around herself like a cloak, her shoulders rigid. "Majesty," he said quietly. "Thank you." She did not respond. He left, his heart pounding, his hands still bleeding. But as he walked back through the corridors he realized something. She had stopped herself. She had wanted his blood. He had seen the hunger raw and undeniable, but she had stopped. For him. The next evening when the summons came, he hesitated. He had bandaged his hand, but the wound was still fresh. What if the smell of blood was too much? What if she lost control? But the summons was not a request. He went. She was waiting in the same chamber. She did not look at him when he entered, her gaze fixed on the window. "Your hand?" she said. "It's fine, Majesty. Just a scratch." "Show me." He unwrapped the bandage. The cut was clean, already beginning to scab over. She studied it for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "I nearly killed you," she said. "But you didn't." "I wanted to." "I know." He wrapped the bandage back around his hand. "But you didn't." She finally looked at him and he saw something raw in her eyes. "Why are you not afraid?" "I am afraid," he said honestly. "But fear isn't the only thing I feel." "What else is there?" He thought about that. About the nights they had spent together, the conversations, the silences. About the way she listened when he spoke, the way she seemed to value his presence even though he was nothing. A mortal, a tool, a temporary thing. "Gratitude," he said at last. "For being seen. For being more than just what I am." She said nothing for a long time. Then slowly she nodded. "Resume your work, Smith. The armor does not repair itself." He smiled faintly and picked up his tools. And when he was close, adjusting a clasp near her shoulder, she spoke again. Quietly, so quietly he almost missed it. "Thank you." He did not ask what she was thanking him for. He thought he understood. 3 months passed. Or perhaps it was 4. Time in the fortress was strange, measured not in days but in the rhythm of work and rest, of summons and silence. Matthias had long since stopped counting. He had also stopped pretending that the repairs were all that mattered. Oh, he still did the work, meticulously, carefully, with all the skill he possessed. The armor was a masterpiece and it deserved to be maintained as such. But the work was no longer the reason he came when she called. He came because she asked. He came because, in those hours spent in flickering torchlight, with metal and leather between his hands, he felt something he had not felt in years: purpose. She had begun to trust him. He saw it in the way she moved around him, no longer quite so rigid, no longer holding herself at such a careful distance. She would lean slightly when he worked, tilt her head to give him better access, shift her weight to make his task easier. Small things, but they spoke volumes. And she talked more now. Not just about history or power or the nature of her kind, but about smaller things. The taste of wine she remembered from centuries past. The sound of music played on instruments that no longer existed. The way the stars used to look before the sky had grown so dim. Matthias listened, and occasionally he shared his own memories. His childhood in a village whose name he could barely remember. His apprenticeship under a master smith who had been cruel but skilled. The first sword he had forged, and how it had shattered on its first use, and how he had wept over the failure. "But you did not give up," she observed. "No. I made another. And another. Until I got it right. Persistence." She nodded. "A mortal virtue. We do not have it, you know. We who live forever. Why persist when you have endless time to try again?" "Maybe that's why mortals are good at it," he said. "We don't have endless time. We only have now." She considered that, her head tilted in thought. "You are wiser than you seem, Smith." "I'm not wise. I just know what I know." "And what do you know?" He paused, his hands stilling on the armor. I know that even things that seem eternal can break. I know that care and attention matter no matter how strong something appears. And I know that, he hesitated, then continued, that loneliness can be more damaging than any blade. The silence that followed was profound. When he finally looked up, he found her staring at him with an expression he could not name. It was not anger nor surprise but something deeper. Something that looked almost like recognition. You see too much, she said softly. I'm sorry. Don't be. She reached out, and for the second time she touched him, this time laying her cold hand over his where it rested on her armor. Don't be. His breath caught. Her hand was like ice, but it did not feel hostile. It felt deliberate, intentional. Majesty. Alira. He blinked. What? My name. It is Alira. She withdrew her hand, but her gaze remained fixed on his. You should know it. You have earned that much. Thank you, Majesty. Alira. Just Alira. When we are alone, you may call me Alira. Felt like a gift. A dangerous, precious gift. Alira, he repeated, tasting the name. It fit her, somehow. Sharp and elegant, ancient and beautiful. She smiled, a real smile, not the cold curve of lips he had seen before, but something genuine. It transformed her face, softening the harsh lines, making her look less like a monument and more like a woman. Good, she said. Now finish your work, Matthias. The night is not yet over. He returned to the armor, but his hands were unsteady. His mind raced with questions he did not dare ask. Why had she told him her name? What did it mean? Was he reading too much into this or not enough? But he said nothing. He simply worked, and she stood, and the silence between them was no longer heavy with tension but filled with something else. Something that felt almost like companionship. That night, after he had returned to his workshop, he found himself unable to sleep. He lay on his cot, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word, every gesture. Alira. He whispered the name into the darkness, and it felt like a secret. Like something sacred. What was he doing? What was she doing? This was madness. She was a queen, a predator, a creature of the night. He was nothing, a mortal man with rough hands and a forgotten past. There was no future here. No possibility of anything beyond these stolen moments. And yet he could not bring himself to regret it. He thought of the way she had looked at him when he spoke of loneliness. The way her hand had felt on his. The way she had smiled. He thought, too, of the hunger he had seen in her eyes when he had bled. The restraint she had shown. The fear. She was dangerous. But she was also something else. Something he did not have a word for. He fell asleep eventually, his dreams filled with crimson eyes and silver hair and the cold touch of a hand that should not have felt comforting but somehow did. Winter came, or what passed for winter in this place. The air grew colder, the mist thicker, the darkness deeper. Snow fell occasionally, though it never seemed to settle, melting as soon as it touched the stone. Matthias had grown accustomed to the routine. The evening summons, the careful work, the conversations that stretched longer each night. He had learned the contours of Alira's armor as well as he knew the tools of his trade. Every buckle, every plate, every rivet was familiar to him now. He had also learned the contours of her moods. The days when she was distant, her mind elsewhere. The days when she was talkative, almost eager to share. The rare days when she seemed sad. He could not think of another word for it. A melancholy that settled over her like a shroud. On those days he worked in silence and let her be. But then came a night that was different. He had been summoned as usual, but when he arrived, the chamber was empty. He waited, uncertain, his tools laid out on the table. Minutes passed. Then an hour. He was beginning to wonder if he had misunderstood when the door opened and Alira swept in. She was not wearing her armor. Matthias stood, surprised. He had never seen her without it. She wore a gown instead, black silk that seemed to drink the light, trimmed with silver thread that caught the torchlight and shimmered. Her wings were fully spread, and he realized for the first time just how massive they were, stretching nearly wall to wall. She looked magnificent and exhausted. Majesty, Alira, he corrected himself. Are you all right? No, she said flatly. She crossed to the window and stood there, her back to him, her wings slowly folding. I am not all right. He did not know what to say. He had never seen her like this, unguarded, unarmored, vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with metal or leather. What happened? He asked quietly. A challenge, she said. One of my kind. He came to claim my territory. My fortress. She trailed off, then laughed bitterly. My everything. Did you? I killed him. Her voice was cold, final. I tore him apart and scattered the pieces to the winds, as I have done to all who came before him, as I will do to all who come after. Matthias said nothing. There was nothing to say. And when I was done, she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper, I stood over his remains and I felt nothing. No triumph. No satisfaction. Just emptiness. She turned to face him, and he saw that her eyes were not glowing. They were simply red, dark and deep and filled with something that looked like despair. I have lived for centuries, she said. I have conquered and ruled and destroyed. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have outlasted kings and kingdoms and gods. And for what? To stand alone in this fortress, waiting for the next fool to come and try his luck? To spend eternity defending something I am not even sure I want anymore? Matthias took a step toward her, then stopped, unsure. Alira. Do you know what the worst part is? She laughed again, a hollow sound. I cannot even die. Not really. I can be hurt. I can be broken. But I will always heal. Always return. I am trapped in this existence and there is no escape. I'm sorry, he said. It was inadequate, but it was all he had. Why? She looked at him, her expression sharp. You did not make me what I am. You did not ask for this burden. Why should you be sorry? Because you're hurting, he said simply. And I hate seeing that. She stared at him, her lips parting slightly, as if his words had struck some chord deep within her. Then to his shock she moved. In 2 strides she crossed the distance between them, and before he could react, she had reached out and pulled him into an embrace. It was not gentle. Her arms wrapped around him with desperate strength, her face buried against his shoulder, her wings curving forward to encircle them both. He could feel the cold of her body through his clothes, could feel the faint tremor running through her. For a moment he froze, his mind unable to process what was happening. Then slowly he raised his arms and hugged her back. She did not cry, he did not think she could, but he felt the way she clung to him, the way her fingers dug into his back, the way her breath, unnecessary though it was, came in short, sharp gasps. I am so tired, she whispered. So tired of being strong. Of being alone. Of being this. You don't have to be alone, he said quietly. Not right now. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in shadow and silence. Matthias did not know what to do, so he simply held her, offering what comfort he could. It felt absurd, a mortal man comforting an immortal queen, but she seemed to need it, and he would not deny her that. Eventually she pulled back, though she did not release him entirely. Her hands rested on his shoulders, her eyes searching his face. Why are you kind to me? She asked. I am a monster. A killer. I have done things that would make you weep if you knew. I don't think you're a monster, he said. Then you are a fool. Maybe. He offered a faint smile. But I don't think monsters feel tired. I don't think they feel lonely. And I don't think they care. I don't care, she said, but there was no conviction in her voice. Yes, you do. He reached up and gently touched her cheek, his rough hand against her cold, smooth skin. You care about this fortress. About your territory. About? He hesitated, then continued. About me. I think. A little. She did not pull away. Did not deny it. You are dangerous, Matthias, she said softly. More dangerous than any weapon. Because you make me feel things I thought I had forgotten. And that is terrifying. I'm not trying to be dangerous. I know. She closed her eyes, leaning very slightly into his touch. That is what makes it worse. They stayed like that for another moment, suspended in something fragile and precious and utterly impossible. Then she stepped back and the moment broke. Go, she said, her voice once again cold, controlled. I should not have. This was a mistake. Alira? Go, Matthias. Please. There was no command in her voice now. Only exhaustion. He gathered his tools slowly, his heart heavy. At the door he paused. "If you need me," he said quietly, "I'm here. Always." She did not respond. He left, and the door closed behind him with a hollow thud. Alone in the chamber, Elira stood motionless, her arms wrapped around herself, her eyes fixed on the place where he had been. And for the first time in centuries she allowed herself to feel the full weight of her loneliness. For 3 nights there was no summons. Matthias worked in his forge, hammering out horseshoes for mounts that did not exist, repairing weapons that would never be used. He threw himself into the work, trying to quiet the storm in his mind. Had he overstepped? Had his words driven her away? Had he imagined the connection between them, built a castle of hope on a foundation of sand? He did not know. On the 4th night, a servant appeared. But the summons was different. "Her Majesty requests your presence in the throne room." The throne room. He had never been there before. He followed the servant through corridors he recognized and others he did not, climbing stairs that seemed to go on forever. Finally they reached a set of massive doors, carved with scenes of battle and conquest. The servant pushed them open and Matthias stepped inside. The throne room was vast, a cathedral of stone and shadow. Pillars rose like the bones of some ancient beast, supporting a ceiling lost in darkness. At the far end, on a dais of black marble, sat the throne itself, a massive structure of iron and bone, draped with furs and silks. And upon it sat Elira. She was in her armor again, every piece polished to a mirror shine. Her wings were spread wide, framing her like a dark halo. Her eyes glowed with cold, crimson light. She looked every inch the queen. Remote. Untouchable. Terrifying. "Approach," she commanded. Matthias walked forward, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. He felt the weight of her gaze on him, heavy as iron. When he reached the base of the dais, he knelt as he had that first night. "Your Majesty." "Rise." He stood, meeting her eyes. For a long moment neither of them spoke. Then Elira leaned forward slightly, her expression unreadable. "I have decided," she said, her voice cold and formal, "that your services are no longer required." The words hit him like a blow. "Majesty? You have served adequately, but I have no further need of a smith. You are dismissed. You will be escorted to the borders of my territory and released." He stared at her, disbelief warring with hurt. I don't understand." "You do not need to understand. You need only obey." "Elira? Do not use that name." Her voice cracked like a whip. "I am your queen. You will address me as such." He flinched. "Your Majesty. Please. If I have done something wrong." "You have done nothing wrong." She stood, descending the steps of the dais until she was level with him. "That is the problem. You have done everything right. You have been skilled and respectful and," she paused, her jaw tightening, "kind. And I cannot allow it to continue." "Why not?" "Because it is dangerous." The words burst from her with unexpected force. "Because every night you are here, I feel the walls I have built crumbling a little more. Because when you look at me, I do not see fear or greed or hatred, I see something worse. I see hope. And I cannot afford hope, Matthias. It is a luxury I do not possess." "That's not true." "It is." She reached out and grabbed his shoulders, her grip iron hard. "I am not like you. I cannot love. I cannot dream. I cannot hope for a future that is anything but more of the same, endless night, endless solitude, endless survival. And if I allow myself to believe otherwise even for a moment, it will destroy me. Or it could save you," he said quietly. She froze, her eyes widening. "You're not a machine," he continued. "You're not just a predator or a queen or a symbol. You're a person. And people need connection. They need to not be alone." "I am not a person," she said, but her voice was shaking now. "I am a monster." "Then I'm a fool for caring about a monster." They stared at each other, the space between them charged with everything they had not said, everything they could not say. "You should go," Elira whispered. "For your own sake. For mine. This cannot end well." "I don't care." "You should." "But I don't." He reached up and covered her hands with his own. "I don't care if it's dangerous. I don't care if it's impossible. I don't care if it ends badly. I only care that right now in this moment, You are not alone. She closed her eyes, and for a heartbeat he thought she was going to push him away. But instead she pulled him closer, her forehead coming to rest against his. You are an idiot, she murmured. I know. This will not work. Probably not. I will outlive you by centuries. I know that too. And yet you stay. And yet I stay. She opened her eyes, and he saw that they were no longer cold. They were burning, but not with hunger. With something else. Something he had never expected to see. Then stay, she said, her voice barely audible. For as long as you can. For as long as you dare. And I will try. I do not know if I can be what you see in me. But I will try. That's all I ask. She released him, stepping back, and for a moment the mask returned, the queen, the warrior, the immortal. But there was a crack in it now, a fissure through which he could see the woman beneath. Return to your workshop, she said. Tomorrow night I will summon you again. The armor always needs attention. He smiled. Yes, Majesty. Alira, she corrected, and there was the faintest hint of a smile on her lips. When we are alone, you may call me Alira. Yes, Alira. He bowed and turned to leave. Matthias. He paused, looking back. Thank you. He nodded and walked away, his heart lighter than it had been in days. Behind him, Alira sank back onto her throne, her wings folding around her like a cloak. And for the first time in a very, very long time, she did not feel quite so alone. Time moved differently after that night. The repairs continued, of course. Armor was armor, and even the finest craftsmanship required maintenance. But the work had changed. It was no longer just about the metal and leather. It was about the moments in between, the conversations, the silences, the gradual lowering of walls that had stood for centuries. Alira began to share more of herself. Not in grand revelations, but in small details that painted a picture of a life, an existence, that stretched beyond comprehension. She told him of the night she had been turned. A battle centuries ago when she had been mortal. A warrior leading her people against an invading force. She had fought bravely, fiercely, and when the vampire lord had found her dying on the battlefield, he had offered her a choice, death or eternity. I chose eternity, she said, her voice distant. I thought it meant power, freedom, victory. I did not realize it meant watching everyone I loved turn to dust. That it meant becoming something they would have feared. Do you regret it? Matthias asked. She considered the question for a long time. I do not know. Regret implies I had a choice. And I did once. But that choice is so far in the past now that it feels like it belonged to someone else. The woman I was, she is a ghost. I am what remains. She's still there, Matthias said. I can see her. In the way you speak of your people. In the way you protect this place. In the way you, he hesitated. In the way you care. Caring is dangerous. So is living. She smiled faintly at that. You have an answer for everything, don't you? Not everything. But I try. Another night she asked him about his dreams. I don't dream much anymore, he admitted. Or if I do, I don't remember them. But when you did, what did you dream of? He thought back to his youth, to the days before the fortress, before the summons, before the endless twilight. Freedom, I suppose. The open road. Traveling from town to town, making things for people, seeing new places. I wanted to leave a mark. Not a big one, just something that said I was here. That I mattered. And now I'm here. And I suppose, he smiled. I suppose I've left my mark in a way. On your armor, if nothing else. On more than my armor, she said quietly. He looked up at her, surprised. She was not looking at him, her gaze fixed on the window, but there was a softness to her expression that had not been there before. You have left a mark on me, Matthias. Whether you intended to or not. He did not know what to say to that. So he said nothing and simply returned to his work, his heart full. You've said that before. It bears repeating. And then, before he could respond, she leaned down and kissed him. It was gentle, tentative, as if she were discovering something new. Her lips were cold, but not unpleasantly so. There was a carefulness to the kiss, a restraint, as if she were afraid of hurting him. When she pulled back, her eyes were wide, uncertain. Was that all right? She asked. He smiled, his heart racing. More than all right. I have not done that in a very long time. I was not sure. It was perfect, he said and kissed her again. This time she responded with more confidence, her hands moving to his shoulders, pulling him closer. He wrapped his arms around her, feeling the cold strength of her body, the slight tremor that ran through her. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless, or at least he was. This is madness, Elira said, resting her forehead against his. I know. It cannot last. I know. And yet, he agreed. They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms, suspended in something fragile and precious and impossible. And for that moment it was enough. As the weeks turned to months, the dynamic between them shifted further. Elira began to relax in his presence. She would lean against the wall while he worked or sit on the edge of a table, her wings folded loosely behind her. She would laugh, an actual laugh, warm and genuine, at something he said. She would reach out and touch him without hesitation, adjusting his collar or brushing soot from his cheek. And Matthias, for his part, found himself falling. It was not a sudden thing. It was gradual, like the slow turn of seasons, like the way dawn crept over the horizon. He had not intended it, had not wanted it, knowing how impossible it was. But the heart, he discovered, did not care about impossibility. He loved her. It was a foolish, reckless, utterly hopeless love. She was immortal and he was not. She was a queen and he was a smith. She was a predator and he was prey. There was no future here. No happy ending. But he loved her anyway. And the terrifying, wonderful thing was that he hoped, that she might feel the same. One night, as he was finishing a particularly intricate repair on her gauntlet, she spoke. Matthias. Yes. If you could leave this place, if I gave you the choice to return to the world beyond, would you take it? He paused, his hands stilling. Are you asking me to leave? No. I am asking if you would choose to. He set down his tools and looked up at her. Why do you want to know? Because I need to understand. You are here because I summoned you. Because you had no choice. But if you had one now, would you stay? He held her gaze. Yes. Why? Because there's nothing out there for me anymore. And because, he took a breath. Because everything I care about is here. She stared at him, her eyes searching his face as if trying to determine whether he was telling the truth. You should not care about me, she said quietly. I know. I will outlive you. I know that too. And when you are gone, I will be alone again. Then I'll make sure the time we have counts. She reached out and cupped his face in her cold hands, her thumbs brushing against his cheekbones. You are a fool, she whispered. Winter deepened and with it came a change in the fortress. The servants moved with more urgency. The corridors, usually silent, now echoed with the distant sound of movement, footsteps, the clatter of weapons, the low murmur of voices. Something was happening, though Matthias did not know what. Elira was different as well. She was distracted during their evenings together, her mind clearly elsewhere. She would stop mid-sentence, her head tilting as if listening to something he could not hear. Her wings would twitch with agitation. Elira, he said one night after she had fallen silent for the third time. What's wrong? She looked at him and he saw worry in her eyes, real, genuine worry. There are others coming, she said. More of my kind. They have heard rumors. Rumors of weakness. Weakness. Of me. She turned away, her wings folding tightly against her back. They sense that I am distracted, vulnerable, and they are coming to test me. Matthias felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold of the fortress. How many? 3, perhaps 4. It does not matter. I will defeat them. I always have. But it will not end. There will always be more. Always another challenger, another test. That is the way of my kind. We do not build. We do not create. We only take and destroy and claim. She looked back at him, her expression pained. And I am tired of it, Matthias. So tired. He stood and crossed to her, taking her hands in his. Then stop. I cannot. If I do not defend my territory, then lose it, he said. Let them have the fortress. Let them have the power. Come away. She stared at him as if he had suggested she cut off her own wings. Come away. To where? What would I do? What would I be without this? You would be free, he said. Free to choose your own path. Free to be something other than a queen or a warrior or a predator. I do not know how to be anything else. Then learn. With me. She pulled her hands away, shaking her head. You do not understand. I'm not like you. I cannot simply walk away from what I am. My nature, it demands this. The hunger, the need for power, the instinct to dominate, it is woven into my very being. Then fight it, Matthias said. You fought your hunger that night when I bled. You fought your nature every time you've chosen to be kind instead of cruel. You're stronger than you think. And if I am not? Then I'll be there to help you. However I can. She looked at him for a long time, her expression unreadable. Then slowly she shook her head. You would give up everything for me, she said quietly. Your freedom. Your safety. Perhaps even your life. And I do not know if I am worth that. You are, he said simply. You cannot know that. I do. She reached out and touched his cheek, her cold fingers lingering. If I continue this fight, I will win. But I will remain what I am, a queen in a fortress, alone save for the servants and the challengers. If I leave, she trailed off. If I leave, I do not know what I will become. And that terrifies me more than any battle. Then be terrified, Matthias said. But be terrified together with me. Not alone. Elira closed her eyes, and for a moment he thought she was going to refuse. Thought she was going to pull away and return to the cold, distant queen she had been when they first met. But then she opened her eyes, and there was resolve in them. When this is over, she said, when I have dealt with the challengers, we will talk, truly talk, about what comes next. Promise. I promise. He pulled her into an embrace, and she held him tightly, her wings wrapping around them both. Be careful, he whispered. I always am. But he heard the lie in her voice. The battle came 2 nights later. Matthias was in his workshop when he heard the sounds, the clash of steel, the roar of inhuman voices, the thunder of wings. He ran to the nearest window and looked out over the courtyard. Elira was there, a whirlwind of black and crimson, her wings spread wide, her armor gleaming in the moonlight. She moved with a speed and grace that was almost impossible to follow, her claws and blades striking with lethal precision. She faced 3 others, 2 males and a female, each as tall and terrible as she. They fought with savage ferocity, the courtyard becoming a storm of blood and shadow. Matthias watched, his heart in his throat, unable to look away. Elira was magnificent. She was death incarnate, a force of nature that could not be stopped. One by one her challengers fell. The first lost his head to her blade. The second was torn apart by her claws. The third, the female, lasted longer, but in the end she too fell, her wings shredded, her throat torn out. When it was over, Elira stood alone in the courtyard, surrounded by the broken bodies of her enemies. Her armor was dented and bloodied, her wings torn in places. But she was alive. Matthias ran from the workshop, his feet carrying him through the corridors and out into the cold night air. He reached her just as she swayed, her strength finally giving out. He caught her before she fell, his arms wrapping around her waist. I've got you, he said. She looked up at him, her eyes dim, her face pale even by her standards. Matthias. Don't talk. Let me get you inside. No, she gripped his arm with surprising strength. No. I need to tell you something. It can wait. It cannot. She took a shuddering breath. When you asked me to leave, to come away with you, I wanted to. More than I have wanted anything in centuries. But I was afraid. I know. But I am not afraid anymore. She cupped his face with one bloody hand. If you still want me, if you still believe I can be more than this, then I will come. I will leave this place and never return. I will be yours for as long as you will have me. Matthias felt tears prick his eyes. I will always have you. She smiled, a real genuine smile, and then her eyes closed and she went limp in his arms. Elira. Panic surged through him. Elira, stay with me. But she did not respond. He lifted her, gods, she was heavy in the armor, and carried her inside, his mind racing. She needed blood. She needed to feed. But he could not leave her. Could not risk. He made a decision. In a quiet chamber, he laid her down and pulled off his shirt. Then without hesitation he took one of his tools, a small, sharp knife, and cut his forearm. Blood welled up immediately, bright and red. He pressed his arm to her lips. "Drink," he whispered. "Please." For a moment nothing happened. Then her instincts took over. Her eyes snapped open, glowing with sudden intensity, and her fangs sank into his flesh. The pain was immediate and sharp, but he did not pull away. He held her, feeling his blood flow into her, feeling his strength fade as hers returned. When she finally released him, her eyes were bright again, her color restored. She looked at him in horror. "What did you do?" "What I had to," he said, already feeling lightheaded. "You fool. You could have." "But I didn't." He smiled weakly. "And you're all right. That's all that matters." She stared at him, her expression filled with 1,000 emotions he could not name. Then she pulled him down and kissed him fiercely, desperately. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "I do not know when it happened. But I love you." "I love you too," he said. And then the darkness took him. Matthias woke to softness. For a moment he thought he was dreaming. The workshop cot was hard as stone, and the workshop itself was always too hot or too cold, never comfortable. But this was soft, warm even. He opened his eyes and found himself in a bed, a real bed with silk sheets and thick blankets. Torches burned in sconces on the walls, casting gentle, flickering light. The room was unfamiliar but elegant, with tapestries hanging from the walls and a large window overlooking the misty abyss beyond. And sitting beside the bed, her hand resting lightly on his, was Alira. She was no longer in her armor. She wore a simple gown of deep blue, her wings folded behind her, her silver hair unbound and falling in waves down her back. She looked different, softer, almost human. When she saw he was awake, relief flooded her face. "You're awake," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank the forgotten gods you're awake." "How long?" His voice was hoarse. 3 days. She squeezed his hand gently. "You lost a great deal of blood. I thought I had killed you. You didn't." He managed a weak smile. "Takes more than that to kill me." "Do not jest about this," she said sharply, but there were tears in her eyes, actual tears gleaming in the torchlight. "I could have lost you. I could have. But you didn't." He reached up with his free hand and touched her face. "I'm here. And you're here. That's all that matters." She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. "I do not deserve you. Probably not. But you're stuck with me anyway." She laughed, a wet, shaky sound, and opened her eyes. "I meant what I said. When you wake we will leave this place. Together." "Are you sure?" he asked. "This is your home. Your kingdom." "It is a prison," she said. "And I am done being a prisoner. I want to see what else there is. To be something other than a queen or a warrior. To be," she hesitated. "To be with you." Matthias felt his heart swell. "Where will we go?" "I do not know. Somewhere far from here. Somewhere the challengers will not find us. Somewhere we can be," she smiled faintly. "Ordinary." "You could never be ordinary." "Then somewhere I can pretend." She stood, still holding his hand. "But first you need to recover. I will not have you collapsing on me the moment we leave." "Yes, ma'am." She raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am?" "Well, I can't call you Majesty anymore if you're not a queen. Then call me Alira. Just Alira." "Just Alira," he repeated, savoring the sound. "I can do that." She leaned down and kissed his forehead. "Rest. I will be here when you wake. Promise." "Always." He closed his eyes, a smile on his lips, and drifted back into sleep. 2 weeks later they left. Matthias had recovered fully, his strength returned. Alira had made her preparations, speaking to the few loyal servants, ensuring the fortress would not fall into complete chaos in her absence. She did not owe them anything, she said, but she was not cruel. They traveled light. Matthias carried his most essential tools, and Alira wore a simple cloak over traveling clothes, her wings hidden beneath. The armor, the beautiful, intricate armor that had brought them together, was left behind, stored in the armory. "I do not need it anymore," she said when Matthias asked. It was a symbol of what I was, not what I want to be. They walked through the mist-shrouded valleys, leaving the fortress behind. Matthias did not look back, but he noticed that Elira did, just once, her expression unreadable. "Regrets?" he asked quietly. "No," she said. "Just saying goodbye." 5 years passed. The village they found was small, nestled in a valley far to the south where the sun actually shone more often than not. It was a place that had seen little of the darkness that gripped the northern reaches, a place where children played in the streets and farmers worked their fields without fear. Matthias set up a smithy on the edge of the village. It was a modest building much smaller than the workshop in the fortress, but it was his. He made horseshoes and plowshares, knives and nails, all the mundane necessary things that kept the community alive. The work was honest and the pay was fair and he was content. Elira lived with him in a small house beside the smithy. She did not work, not in the way the villagers understood work, but she helped in other ways. She tended a small garden, learned to cook with mixed results, and occasionally assisted Matthias at the forge. The villagers did not know what she was. They thought her strange, perhaps, too pale, too tall, too still, but they accepted her as they accepted Matthias. The smith's odd wife who never seemed to age, who only came out after dark, who never ate in public. It was unusual but not threatening. And Elira, for her part, found a strange kind of peace in the simplicity of it all. She did not hunt. She did not kill. When the hunger became too great, Matthias offered his blood willingly and she took only what she needed. It was not the same as the hunts of old, the thrill of the chase and the kill, but it was enough. More than enough. Because she was not alone. On warm evenings they would sit outside the house and watch the sun set, a sight Elira had not bothered to witness in centuries. She would lean against Matthias, her head on his shoulder, and he would wrap his arm around her, and they would simply be. "Do you miss it?" he asked one evening. "The fortress? The power?" Elira considered the question as she always did. "Sometimes," she admitted. "There is a part of me that remembers the weight of a crown, the thrill of battle. But then I look at this." She gestured to the quiet village, the fields, the setting sun. "And I think that this is better. Smaller perhaps, but better. No regrets." "One," she said, and he looked at her in surprise. "I regret that I cannot give you forever. That I will watch you grow old while I remain. That one day I will lose you." Matthias was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. "Then we'll make the time we have count. Every day. Every moment." She looked at him, her crimson eyes soft. "You always say the right thing. It's a gift." She laughed and kissed him, and they stayed like that as the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to emerge. They walked in silence for a while, the world around them slowly brightening as they descended from the mountains. The perpetual twilight gave way to something closer to true daylight, pale and weak but daylight nonetheless. "Where do we go now?" Matthias asked. "Somewhere warm," Elira said. "Somewhere with sun if such a place still exists. Somewhere I can learn to be less. Less queen. Less predator. Less alone." She took his hand, lacing her cold fingers through his warm ones. "And more, this. Whatever we are becoming." Matthias smiled. "I like the sound of that." They continued walking, their path uncertain, their future unknown. But for the first time in longer than either could remember, they were not alone. And that, they both knew, was worth more than any fortress, any kingdom, any eternity. When Matthias died, it was peacefully. In his sleep, with Elira beside him. She did not weep, could not weep, but she held him for a long time, memorizing every line of his face, every callus on his hands. She buried him in the garden, beneath the tree they had planted together on their first spring in the village. She did not mark the grave with stone, but with care, flowers she tended every night, a bench she built so she could sit beside him. And she stayed. She did not return to the fortress. Did not seek out her own kind. She remained in the village, the strange, ageless woman who lived in the smith's house and tended the garden and sometimes, late at night, could be heard speaking softly to the tree. The villagers whispered, of course. But they left her alone. She had never harmed anyone. She was simply there. A fixture like the old mill or the stone bridge. And Elira, for her part, found that she did not mind. She was not a queen anymore. She was not a warrior. She was simply a woman who had loved and been loved, and who carried that love with her through the endless nights. It was not the eternity she had imagined, but it was enough. And sometimes, when the moon was bright and the wind was still, she would sit beneath the tree and close her eyes and imagine she could hear his voice, rough and warm and kind. "You're not alone," he would say. "You never were." And she would smile and believe it, if only for a moment. Years passed. Matthias's hair began to gray, his hands to tremble slightly with age. He moved slower, worked less, spent more time resting. Elira did not change. She remained as she had always been, cold, pale, eternal. But she was there. Always there. Caring for him as he had once cared for her, tending to him with a gentleness that would have shocked anyone who had known her as a queen. "I am afraid," she admitted one night as they lay together in the darkness. "Of what?" "Of losing you. Of being alone again." He took her hand and squeezed it. "You won't be alone. You'll have the memories. All the years we spent together. And maybe," he smiled, "maybe you'll find someone else. Someone who makes you feel the way I did." "There will be no one else," she said fiercely. "You are unique. Irreplaceable." "Then remember me," he said. "And live. Don't go back to the darkness. Stay in the light for both of us." She did not reply. She only held him tighter.